From the beginning of our modern world, we have walked in one direction as we fuel our desire to move faster, grow larger, fly higher. Our short-sighted ambition has been pushing us forward without actually paying attention to where we're headed. It's now clear that path has led us to a cliff. Today, look where we're standing, on the edge. We could choose to keep walking, or we could finally change direction. You've heard all the bad news. Our oceans are rising, leading to terrible erosion and flooding in cities across America. Searing heat is ruining our crops. Wildfires are consuming beloved communities and forests. Drought is threatening our very existence. Monster storms are washing us away. The dominoes are falling. But there is hope and opportunity in these scary times. In fact, a lot of it. Not all is lost as we stand on the edge. It's one of the most important cities on Earth, yet only 19,000 people live here. This is Nuuk, the capital of Greenland. It's where you come if you really want to understand what's happening to our world. You've heard it many times. We are in trouble. But let me actually show you why. I came here to take part in a mission with Josh Willis and crew from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, some of the most accomplished climate scientists on the planet. It's the very last day of a years-long project called Oceans Melting Greenland, or OMG.
It's been 6 years since we've been flying around Greenland, and it's really dominated my life for that entire time. We're trying to measure how the oceans are changing from one year to the next, and how the ice here is changing in response to the oceans. So Oceans Melting Greenland is about exactly that, how the oceans are eating away at the ice here.
Thanks to Josh's 6 years of hard work, we now know a lot more about how our polar ice caps are melting. The mission takes place on a beautiful World War II-era plane that is now loaded with state-of-the-art research equipment.
Here we go.
I buckle in, and we take off. Josh and Ian McCubbin go to work. They have studied over 200 glaciers in Greenland, and today I get to see one up close.
But in the plane, we can fly right over the icebergs and drop right into the water.
As we approach our target zone, we are given an opportunity to absorb the beauty of the moment. It's a view so few are privileged to see. As we get closer to the glacier, I'm first amazed at the ice floes. Freshly broken off icebergs working their way to the open sea.
A white thing floating in the middle, it looks like a chunk of it.
The pilot invites us into the cockpit as we approach. And there it is. It's remarkable. You're looking at the face of a majestic glacier that is several hundred feet tall. And it's right here, where this frozen behemoth meets the water, that is vitally important to our climate crisis.
This one will be a Channel 12.
Channel 12, copy.
From the plane, we're going to be dropping probes into the water.
These probes that we push out of the plane, they actually fall through the water and they measure the temperature not just at the surface, but at each level all the way down to the sea floor.
Through precision flying by the pilot and timing from the crew, I'm allowed to take part in actually doing the launch.
And you can just hold on to it for a minute.
I'm standing at the ready by the tube, and on their mark, I let it go.
Drop, drop, drop.
It hits the water and slowly sinks, sending in data immediately. McCubbin records every digit.
Okay, now we're getting a depth right there, so reading 16 meters.
This is something they have done hundreds of times all over Greenland. It's within those numbers that we find the truth. As we fly back, I see Nuuk out the window, and I can't help but think about the people who live here. They're watching their home change before their eyes. Not only are the glaciers melting, but for the first time ever this year, rain fell on Greenland's highest summit, a place that has only seen snow. A community's culture is in its food. Two chefs, Leif and Malik, invite me to dinner. The name of their company says it all.
Silla food, and Silla means two things. It means weather and consciousness. So those two are interconnected for Greenlandic people.
As we talk, they cook up a feast of Greenland cuisine.
It is very traditional Greenland.
Seal, fish, reindeer, everything caught in the wild, none of it farmed. Much of their traditions are from the native Inuit culture and have not changed for hundreds of years. Sustainability has always been part of their beliefs.
There's a very big space for a very small population, and we are very much in touch with nature and with each other. We're so connected, everybody.
Connected not only with each other, but environmentally with the outside world. Even though they have always lived responsibly, their home is melting.
Well, climate change is inescapable. It affects everyone around the world.
I meet Mr. John Moore with the United States State Department. This is a study so important he flew all the way here on this last day to witness what's happening and learn as much as possible.
The science, as I had the chance to see today in this flight, is profound, and we're gathering more information all the time.
Weeks later, I meet with Willis at JPL in Pasadena after he's had time to study his findings. As expected, the news isn't good, but now there's clarity in what's actually happening.
OMG has really revolutionized our understanding of how the ice sheet is going to melt. Before, we thought of it as melting from above with the air warming, but now we know it's a lot more dynamic than that.
Remember those probes we sent out? They've taught us that it's not the air, it's the water. The glaciers are melting from underneath.
The oceans are playing a huge role in eating away that ice because they store over 90% of the heat that we trap with the greenhouse gases. They're warming, and that warmer water is going to have a bigger and bigger impact on the glaciers.
What happens in Greenland lands at our doorstep. Our oceans are rising far faster than we ever expected. That means high tides and storm surges will be exponentially worse. Property losses, beach erosion, but there's far more to it than that.
The oceans are controlling our climate. The air is just reacting to whatever the oceans do.
Our rising ocean temperatures are changing our weather patterns. Droughts, floods, hurricanes, blizzards. The bottom line is, when you first heard about climate change 10, 20, maybe 30 years ago and thought there was time, there's not. The more we learn, the more we realize we were wrong. There are a few things more fascinating, more powerful than a volcano. They are Mother Nature's way of showing us that she is in charge. This is Fagradalsfjall volcano just outside of Reykjavik, Iceland. It came to life in March, giving us a spectacular view of how our world is constantly and dynamically changing.
But it's also showing is lava coming from underneath.
Dr. Thor Thordarson, a volcanologist at the University of Iceland, has visited it many times, studying its progress. He shows me the lava field as it spews out of a brand new crater.
There's just little cracks that opened in the ground, and lava just started coming out of it. And just sort of more or less sort of bubbling.
He says as far as volcanoes go, this one is very small. Nevertheless, to stand at that lava field in person is a marvel. People flock to it, taking in the alluring beauty and incredible danger.
And you could actually see the very end of it right down here. In fact, there's a lot of tourists there getting a look at the end of the lava flow, but you get a real sense of how giant this is when you go with me in this direction, and you can see it goes the full expanse of this valley over there in that direction. And if you keep going in that direction, that's where you actually get to the volcano.
I quickly learn how strong and putrid the smell is. Dr. Thordarson tells me there are a number of gases a volcano puts out that are toxic.
Like sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, chlorine and fluorine.
Those gases are the reason volcanoes are in the climate change conversation. To show you why, we travel 100 miles to the east. They call this the Eldron lava field. It is the largest of its kind in the world. It came spilling out of the earth in 1783 from a volcano best known as the Laki eruption. 218 square miles of hardened lava now sit here as a reminder. In real life, it seemingly goes forever.
Here's what I find really fascinating about this lava field. Here's your typical lava stone, but you've probably noticed by now what's grown on top of all of this lava, and that's this. It's a moss. Look how soft and comfortable and beautiful it is, as far as the eye can see. And think about this. 250 years ago, this was a tragic, frightening event. Today, it left behind this incredible beauty that is so peaceful.
With a rainbow in the background, it is hard to imagine how this molten monster killed people and livestock. It stole invaluable land, dried up rivers, and that was just the tragedy on the ground. Even worse was what it threw into the sky.
The sulfur loading from the lake eruption is estimated to be 100 million tons.
That enormous cloud of ash and gas changed the world. For comparison, in 1991, Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines erupted. It was the biggest volcanic event in the last 100 years. For days, the massive gas cloud shot 25 miles into the sky. But as big as that was, Iceland's Laki eruption is estimated to be 6 times larger and traveled all over the world.
You can think of it as a fog. With the cloud that you put up in the atmosphere, it's initially staying up sort of between 10 and 15 kilometers height.
That cloud sat in the atmosphere for months, impacting global weather currents, heating some areas, cooling many others, changing the world's climate.
On average, the surface cooling was about 1 degree centigrade on a hemispheric level for 2 to 3 years after the eruption. And that's significant.
Catastrophic changes in the weather caused crop failures and famine. Europe, Africa, India, Japan were so hard hit, millions died.
I think the important part or the important message in this is that, you can live very far away from volcanoes, but you can still be affected by them.
Today, as we deal with our own man-made climate catastrophe, what happens if an eruption equal to Laki suddenly strikes?
We could push the systems over the edge. There's no return. The more we stress the environment, the less of an natural event do we need to actually maybe tip the balance. And that's the worry, really.
There are 1,500 active volcanoes in the world just waiting to blow, and an untold number of others that could suddenly appear.
There's not much we can do about it, but these eruptions have the potential of wiping out whole cultures.
And a final bit of wisdom from an expert of the Earth. It's not the Earth that needs saving.
Mother Earth is fine, and it's going to be fine. It will keep on operating, whatever happens. To me, this whole issue with climate change is not so much about saving our planet as it is about saving us.
The reminders are everywhere, even here in this peaceful place. This is not our world. We are guests whose time may be limited depending on how we behave. This isn't just a beautiful place. This blue lagoon filled with newborn icebergs is a classroom of sorts. There are lessons here that we need to learn.
Every rock actually has a story.
Snevar Gudmundsson is a glaciologist. If this place is a classroom, he is the teacher, and he could read a rock like a textbook.
This is an interesting piece. Not only is it eroded because of collision with other rocks in the glacier, but also that it originates in the mountains there, at about 20 kilometers distance.
The rock he's holding flew out of a volcano way up in the mountains centuries ago, landing on a glacier. Over hundreds of years, that glacier slowly carried that rock to this very spot.
But I can at least tell you that this is probably dumped about 19 years ago.
Dumped here because the glacier that carried this rock suddenly began to melt.
The ice is receding quite fast now. This glacier here has been retreating very rapidly, especially in the last 2 or 3 decades.
That is the reason this place is so important to scientists. This is one of the world's most unmistakable examples of a glacier rapidly melting. Just a few decades ago, on this very spot, we would be buried under a giant sheet of ice that was miles across and up to 2,000 feet tall. That's as tall as the Shanghai Tower, the world's second tallest building. But today, it's all gone. The glacier is now 5 miles away, and what is left in its place is an enormous lake.
This lake is the deepest in Iceland because the ice excavated it down to 300 meters below sea level.
In other words, a once giant glacier, as it scraped its way through this valley, dug a hole 1,000 feet deep. Now that hole is filled with water from the melted ice. And this is not only one of the newest lakes, but the largest lake in the entire country, and it's growing fast.
They gained area size in total about 30 square kilometers in the year 2000. In the year 2050, it doubled.
Those icebergs just recently broke off from the glacier miles away and will float out to sea, each made of ice that is potentially 1,000 years old. Those black stripes tell us their story from long ago.
These are actually ash layers from ancient eruptions. So this is actually what we have in the glaciers here in Iceland. We have a story of eruptions in the ice. For instance, since the 12th century.
Centuries of history dissolving. Gudmundsson has lived here all his life. He has witnessed his home changing faster and faster. The scientist in him says there is no denying our climate crisis is man-made.
This is proof. If you need proof for changing in climate, you should visit a glacier and you will see the change. You will see the ice is just melting.
But there is also the very human part of Gudmundsson. He is a citizen of Iceland whose country is melting away before their very eyes. They don't have the luxury of ignoring it, or worse, denying it.
When you live in a place like this and you see the melting at such rate that you don't have any comparison to, you cannot listen to people that say that nothing is happening. I mean, this is happening so rapidly, it's devastating actually.
He tells me the bigger this lake gets, the smaller they feel. We may see this as a beautiful place, but to those who watch it grow every day, this is simply a symbol of their despair. What a beautiful world we live in. As I stand on this colorful hillside overlooking the vineyards of Solvang, California, I think about a joyful part of our life, wine. Bottled poetry, as Robert Louis Stevenson called it. When it comes to the little things that make life wonderful, for many, it's wine. And for most of us, it's simply the feeling it provides. Each tasty moment takes you to a place that is solely yours. Even when the grapes are harvested, it's a celebration. A new vintage means a new experience to enjoy together. Truly the fruits of our labor. That's why it's sad. This delicious little glass of nature is in danger, thanks to climate change.
This is all I've done all my life. I started when I was fairly young. I just have a passion for it. I love what I do.
Andres Ibarra started working in the wine business 40 years ago. As an immigrant from Mexico, he first did it to help his family of 10 siblings survive. Dropping out of high school, he spent hard days in the vineyard, making $2 an hour. But he wasn't just working, he was learning.
So I'm going to pour the 2014 Petit Syrah.
Eventually, that long road led him here. He has climbed the mountain and now owns his own winery.
Nice to meet you, David. Welcome.
Tierra y Vino.
I just like the color. I like the concentration from the grape. It's got more tannins, more fruit. So that's what makes it special for me. Let's try it. See what you think.
Wine is a craft that has been traced back 8,000 years. It has been part of human culture since the beginning of our recorded history. But it takes a special person to be able to make it. It's passion and artistry, from early in the morning until late at night. That's Ibarra. He loves it.
I'm living my dream.
But he tells me passion isn't enough these days. the world is changing, and so many skilled winemakers are going out of business. As we walk through his vineyard, he shows me why.
The temperatures vary so much, so this one's still struggling to get to the ripeness that we need them. Last year, we had temperatures of 117, 119. It gets worse and worse every year.
But it's not just heat. It's the enormous temperature swings. Even with the high temperatures, there is frost at night.
We might not be able to pick some of the grapes because if they don't get the sugar high enough, nobody's going to want to buy them.
Once these leaves dry up, photosynthesis stops. The fruit doesn't mature.
I had this year where I had someone that canceled a contract on me because the grapes are not getting ripe enough. So what am I going to do?
There is also drought.
Back in the 80s, 70s when I got here, we were getting, a lot more rain than what we're getting now. Now we're lucky if we get half of it.
Today, he has to buy so much of his water because it just doesn't rain anymore. And that's expensive, especially since supplies have dwindled.
For a small producer like me, I'm only doing 1,200 cases a year. Am I going to be able to survive this? I don't know.
Planting and maintaining just a single acre costs him $40,000.
It's something that you don't take lightly. Your expense, you're going to have to just wait and see what happens.
And as we all know, what often happens is wildfires. They have ravaged California the last few years, and that brings us to the third danger, smoke taint. Even if a fire is miles away, the smoke travels hundreds of miles sometimes, and if it lands on your grapes, they are ruined.
In 2017, the big fire they had in Napa, a lot of the wineries don't have a vintage in Napa, 2017 vintage, because the smoke was too much for the grape itself.
He tells me so many of his fellow winemakers have given up. The climate has changed too much. The rest, like him, are hopeful, but realistic.
It's like a waiting game kind of a thing. We're just waiting to see what New Year's going to do. We're going to have to adjust to what Mother Nature's throwing at us.
And that's the whole world, isn't it? Waiting, hoping. They call this place the City of Fairy Tales. Copenhagen, Denmark is known as the happiest city in the world. I found it to be a vibrant, colorful, gorgeous place with its gardens, canals, delicious food, and spirits. Seemingly everyone is on a bike, and young people spend their free time keeping this place immaculate. It's only fitting that in a beautiful city like this, art is taken seriously. It's been part of the culture here for 4,000 years. They understand how powerful and influential art can be, and that's why I'm here.
The sculptures are created by Swedish artist duo Birgit and Bergström, and each sculpture consists of 300 kilos of iron, and they're shaped like carbon dioxide molecules. The weight of the sculpture corresponds to 2 weeks of your emissions, or the average Dane's emissions.
Yeah, that is really, really heavy.
Carolina Edman is using these sculptures to help us understand a very important part of the climate crisis. Each one weighs 660 pounds and is the amount of damaging carbon a Danish citizen will put into the air in just 2 weeks.
What I think that art can do is really activate and really make sure that we understand things beyond facts and numbers, that we can see things with our senses and our emotions.
The fact that she put this at the prestigious Copenhagen Business School is part of the plan. Carolina is a student herself and feels her generation needs to be exposed to more than just ways to make money. She says they need to learn how to make it responsibly. She ties climate change to greed. Why would fossil fuel companies, politicians, the super wealthy change a system that has given them so much money?
I was sitting at home and watching the richest man on earth, Jeff Bezos, floating around in a spacecraft and eating Skittles in zero gravity. This was only a few days after the UN had released a fresh report on the state of the climate. And this really embodies the tragic story of the era we live in, the awesome technology and the wildfires in our forests, the booming stock markets, but also the dying bees. All this relates to the deepest paradox of humanity, that our current political and economic models are eroding the conditions for our species.
So we did a series of these bank buildings, both like they're interesting as this kind of power architecture, and we scale them down and we use them as flower pots.
At a gallery a few miles away, artist Jacob Finger reinforces the theme that our addiction to money is a big part of our climate change paralysis. These miniature bank towers each share a space with a mind-altering drug.
Psychoactive plants, actually coming from the marijuana to the San Pedro and then to the devil helmet at the end is like the strongest.
In fact, devil's helmet is toxic. It'll kill you. Jacob says it's a fate that could be in store for our species if we don't sober up and get over our love for money.
I think a lot of the discussion today is in relation to climate change is actually about what will it cost? You know, what do we have to give? What do we have to lose for making these changes? And that's often where things stop to change, because we're actually stuck in a system that may not be able to change.
But Jacob is optimistic. Art moves him. Hopefully, it is powerful enough to get others to feel his message.
We need a cultural change, and to do a cultural change, you need to change your mind. And that is part of what art does. The most important role of an artist is actually to change the perspective.
If you put this on.
And that is what Carolina is doing, luring people into a sensory experience, providing enlightenment to bright young minds.
The whole point of the project is really to feel the weight of your emissions. So when you lock yourself up, you can really stand there and contemplate on the mass and density of these otherwise invisible fumes.
What's really distressing, even embarrassing for me, is the fact that I should wear 2 of these, because the average American emits double the amount of carbon than someone from Denmark. This is art, delivering a heavy message in its own beautiful, poignant way. There is hope. Just as we have used science to power our world with fossil fuels, we're now using science to stop the damage it has caused. In this case, through technology called carbon capture.
The hope is to reverse climate change. It's, simply speaking, it's a climate time machine. It allows us to go backwards.
Going backwards is our future does sound weird, but here's what he means. This is called Orca. It sits just outside of Reykjavik, Iceland. It's a dream Christoph Gebald, founder and CEO of Climeworks, has been working on for 14 years.
Orca is the world's largest direct air capture and storage facility, meaning it has fans and takes in atmospheric air, obviously containing CO2. It filters the CO2 out of the air.
Think of it as this huge air filtration system. It sucks in air and then it filters out all the carbon. They say in the first year of operation, they believe this facility will pull 4,000 tons of carbon out of the air.
It's tough to put 4,000 tons of carbon into perspective, but we all learned in grade school that trees are good for the earth. They convert CO2, or carbon, into oxygen.
When you see Orca, it's on a land plot of roughly 2,000 square meters. On this land plot, you could plant around about 200 trees. They would capture 4 tons of CO2. Orca captures 4,000 tons.
Greed has led to the world losing enormous amounts of trees. In complete disregard to the long-lasting damage to the earth, rainforests are being cut down to make room for crops that can give investors quick profits. Add to that the resulting climate change causing drought and wildfires. More trees are lost. This cycle of demise gets faster with each day. We need ideas like Orca, But why put it in Iceland?
Iceland for two reasons. First is access to green energy, concretely geothermal energy. We can use that heat for driving our process. Point two is Iceland is more or less consisting of a rock called basalt. And this rock has an affinity to CO2, meaning if we take CO2 from the air and pump it underground, it will turn CO2 into stone and consequently lock it away forever.
And even though this facility sits near the top of the world, it's cleaning up your pollution, no matter where you live.
Emissions of China or emissions of the US reach Iceland in a couple of days because the atmosphere is very well mixed. Pulling carbon from the air in Iceland will have a cooling effect globally.
The important point is, if this place is successful, you're going to see a whole lot more of them popping up in other parts of the world, including quite possibly the United States. And the bottom line is, it's these kinds of ideas that will help bring our world society into a carbon neutral place, something the world desperately needs, something we need as soon as possible.
California is investing money and manpower into this technology. China too. Perhaps this is the beginning of a revolution. Great minds are responding to our climate crisis. Yes, there is work to be done, but in that, there is also hope. As we continue to scour the world for solutions, the journey leads us to Japan, one of the most traditional, yet technologically advanced countries in the world. And we find hope sitting on a cliffside overlooking the ocean in Fukushima. It's an idea that has risen from the ashes of failure. But now, after years of research and analysis, they have a new path. Japan, the land of the rising sun, has chosen the very thing the sun is made of, hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe, and it burns clean. In Japan's ambitious goal to be carbon neutral by 2050, they now believe hydrogen is the way to get there. That's why they built this state-of-the-art, 100% green hydrogen facility in Fukushima, near the old nuclear plant. It's a statement. That is the past. This is the future.
We are standing at the precipice of an important realization that the world is coming to.
Dr. Jack Brower is with the National Fuel Cell Research Center at the University of California, Irvine, and one of the most respected hydrogen experts in America.
If we really want to achieve zero emissions in all sectors of the economy, we absolutely need hydrogen to do it.
UCI is leading the way in understanding hydrogen and its many uses. We can make it from multiple sources. Natural gas, which is not fully green because it originates from a fossil fuel. Methane, perhaps from cows or trash decomposition. Or the way Japan is making it, from water. They are harnessing power from solar, in this case 68,000 panels, and then using that power to split water into hydrogen. The process is clean and the source, water, is abundant. From there, hydrogen can be stored as liquid or gas and used however and whenever you need it. That's a big deal.
Hydrogen can be stored in a tank and hardly lose any of the energy, even over periods of months to years. Whereas a battery, if you charged it today, after a year it has no charge left. If we need rapid fueling, hydrogen is better. If we need long range, hydrogen is better. Or if we need a heavy payload, like in trucks or trains or ships, then hydrogen is better because it's much lighter than batteries.
And that brings us to the vehicles we are choosing to drive. Japan hopes to someday have all its vehicles running on hydrogen, also called fuel cell electric, while in America, it's battery electric cars that are catching on.
So the reason that battery electric vehicles are so popular today is that we can charge them at home. We cannot recharge a fuel cell electric vehicle without a new investment in hydrogen fueling infrastructure.
So, hydrogen vehicles have a long way to go to match the convenience of battery-run electric cars. But one thing to think about when you plug in your battery-powered vehicle, most power grids still run largely on fossil fuels. By plugging in, you're still polluting the earth. Hydrogen can fix that.
Hydrogen is the only known zero emissions vector that can enable us to get 100% renewable energy into all sectors of the economy.
Hydrogen can power our grids, our homes, our cars, but we have to build the infrastructure. Japan is confident this is the way forward. The question is, should we follow? In the Pacific Ocean near Catalina Island, divers quietly slip into the water. It's a common scene off the coast of California, but this mission is different.
Let me know when you get 10,000 psi.
One of the divers is Dr. Diane Kim, senior scientist at USC Institute of Environmental Studies. She's leading a group who's working on something that, if successful, would be a radical change for all of us. The story begins on land, in an old warehouse that's home to a new idea.
We're working on a project that's funded by the Department of Energy to explore giant kelp. This is the common seaweed variety that we find off the coast here in Southern California, to explore that organism as a potential source of fuel, alternative fuel that can replace fossil fuels.
It's hard to imagine, but we can actually get oil from kelp grown in eco-friendly farms and then use it to fuel cars and other vehicles.
The finished product can theoretically be just pumped straight into cars that exist today. So you don't need to create a whole new energy infrastructure. If we can find a bio-crude from a sustainable source like kelp to replace fossil fuels, then we're hitting, a lot of different sectors in transportation.
Kelp is a biofuel. Biofuels come from plants, algae, or animal waste. There are many, but kelp has advantages. Take corn, for instance. It's used largely to make ethanol. But corn is grown on land. There's limited space. It needs fresh water, fertilizer, pesticides, and farm equipment that burns fossil fuels. None of that is required with kelp. And there's a reason they call it the sequoias of the sea.
Each individual can have hundreds of fronds, and each frond can grow up to over 100 feet. And so you can cut them off, and the younger ones that are shorter and near the base will grow up in their place. And so you don't have to constantly reseed these kelp farms, theoretically.
Kelp is one of the fastest growing plants on Earth, 1 to 2 feet a day, and Kim's group has found a way to make it grow even faster. The ocean's densest nutrients are in deep water, but kelp grows on the surface because it needs sunlight. They experimented with an elevator that pulls the kelp into the deep water at night and then pulls it back to the surface in the day.
The cycled kelp generated about 4 times more biomass than the kelp growing near the native kelp bed, which, was incredible.
Now they're working on a prototype drone that will cycle the kelp up and down, and she's confident it'll work. For Dr. Kim, the science is clear, but there's another side of the story, the business side. Big ideas are just the beginning.
We know how to do it. We just have to scale it up in a way that is cost effective, that minimizes harm to the environment. And to do that, we're going to need some investment. We're going to need support from the government, support from the public to really push this forward.
Look how big this warehouse is. This is the old Port of Los Angeles. Now it's run by Alta Sea, a cooperative environment that is meant to incubate great ocean-oriented ideas for eco-friendly businesses. Dr. Kim's project is one of many. 400,000 feet of space. They think they'll need every bit of it if people are willing to invest in a blue economy.
There can be a lot of job creation tied to the ocean, tied to a more sustainable economy and an environment. And a lot of that they envision to be connected to the ocean space. So they're calling it the blue economy.
It's only fitting. Love of money got us into this fossil fuel mess, and maybe it's the driving force to get us out. Our world will be far more willing to make radical changes in our energy infrastructure if we can make money doing it. But this time, responsibly.
Hello there, little lady.
Say, what's climate?
Is that Elvis talking about climate? It is a curious combination, but if it helps save the planet, why not?
Wind, cloudiness, as a function of time throughout the year, composited over many years.
What?
If he looks familiar, that's actually Josh Willis from JPL. You first met him on board that research plane flying over Greenland's glaciers. He runs OMG, Oceans Melting Greenland. Willis and crew spent 6 years unlocking the secrets of glacial melt, but Josh's passion goes beyond research. For him, it's just as important to share and influence. That's where his alter ego, Climate Elvis, comes in.
Who knows that's weather? Oh, that's the weather. I like to use comedy and make people laugh. You know, it's a scary topic anyway, and if we can have a laugh or two while we're learning about it, I think it makes it easier to understand and accept. So I think kids love it when they see Climate Elvis with his sideburns and his funny glasses.
And it's not just this rock star. It's his whole crew that embraces this passion, like Ian Fenty.
One of the most amazing landscapes you'll find anywhere on the planet.
What's remarkable about their Greenland project, in between trips to glaciers and gathering information, they found a way to talk to every high schooler and middle schooler in all of Greenland. Every single one.
So we had, a whole week of very intense engagement in getting the word out about why we were there.
You're going to talk to Ian. He's also very nice.
From inviting students to the research plane on the tarmac to joining them in the classroom, they understand that meeting NASA's scientists would be something truly special for these young people. And these real-life superheroes are making up for shortcomings in the past.
There's a term we've heard from Greenlanders called hit-and-run science, and it's an issue that I think more and more scientists are becoming aware of, where scientists from the West or from Europe, they come to Greenland, they collect data, and then they go home with it. And the people of Greenland are not kept in the loop.
And there's another even deeper layer to this effort. These bright, young, thirsty minds in Greenland are looking for direction, and there is a massive void to fill in their own country.
There are very, very few Earth scientists that come from Greenland, even though it's a place that's changing the most because of global warming. And I think it's super important to educate these kids about what's happening in their own backyard.
Seeing the world melting away and all the catastrophes that are connected to it is scary. But when the scientists doing the research can still find a way to be joyful about what they do, there has to be hope.
Personally, I love it. I remember when I was that age how important it was for me to hear from real-life scientists and engineers about what they were doing.
It's most exciting to talk to young people because they really get that the climate's changing, that we're shifting into a new world, and I think they're the ones that are ultimately going to have to save us from all this and live with the consequences.
And it's all getting warmer because of us?
The rock star and the superhero. It's a pretty cool combination. And together, they're saving the world. It's clear, as we teeter on the edge, our next few steps are crucial to our survival. Knowing that makes our climate problem seem insurmountable. To quote glaciologist Gudmundsson, the bigger the problem gets, the smaller we feel. And we all feel it.
I feel a lot of guilt, but also a lot of anxiety. There's this whole debate right now around climate anxiety. I have some female friends who actually don't want to get children because they feel like they're going to be born into a world which is very chaotic.
That anxiety only builds when you hear about the future with our rising oceans.
Maybe hundreds of millions of people actually on the move, finding a new place to live. Because some areas around the globe where a lot of people live are just above sea level. Bangladesh, Florida.
But if I've learned anything in talking to the experts around the world, the fight is just beginning. In people, there is hope.
People are seeking purpose, right? We're getting a lot of job applications from people who worked, 20 years for someone, maybe earned a lot of money, and then suddenly noticed, oh shoot, I'm lacking purpose in my life.
We know the technology is there, and it's a matter of connecting the pieces and getting the right amount of investment to make that into a reality. We have no choice. We're so close to creating this new reality that I remain really optimistic about our future.
When you look at the transitions in so many economies away from fossil fuels, I think you can't help but be optimistic.
We're careening toward the cliff, make no mistake, but we still have time to make our planet's climate habitable, and we have to start right now.
Even Josh Willis, who knows as much as anyone about where we are and where we're headed, can not only smile, remember, he sings.
Sunny on Sunday, high 73. Monday, rain was pouring down on me. Tuesday was cold, I almost froze my toes. Oh, what's it gonna be next week? Who knows? That's weather. Oh, that's the weather you got. But you take a bunch of weather and you average it together and you're doing the climate rock. Our climate is the average of the weather you see. The critters and plants all know where to be. A cactus can't live in the tropical rain, and polar bears don't dig Bahrain. That's climate. You take a bunch of weather and you average it together and you're doing the climate rock.